Hello and welcome to this February monthly challenge kickoff. We are very excited to be doing this. Virtual Coffee is an intimate group of developers at all stages of the journey, and our mission is to be a welcoming tech community that allows room for growth and mentorship at all levels and to create opportunities for learning, leadership, and contribution for everyone. I think I got that right. I'm Becca, and this is for our February kickoff, which we have done a couple of times before, but I think last year we did it in April. So I am going to walk you through it. We're going to talk about some of the things that we can do this month or talk about, and I'm going to go ahead and share let me share my screen so we can walk through it. Okay, so right now our challenge is get job ready, resumes, cover letters, and elevator pitches. If you have questions at any time, if you want to jump in and share something, feel free to do that. But the idea this month is to get job ready, and you don't have to be searching for a job right now to participate in this challenge. It's always good to keep these things updated, to think about new ways to present this information. And so we always like to put the challenge page up there to give you more information. So all of the things that we'll be discussing this month throughout the challenge will happen in the monthly challenge channel in Slack, but definitely refer to these resources. So this monthly challenge is sponsored by Joe Mazzotti, who is the founder of Rails Dev, the reverse job board for Ruby on Rails developers. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely check it out. Thanks, Joe. And here are the things that we're going to be working on this month. So maybe you're creating a brand new resume, maybe you're updating another one. We'll be working on resumes and cover letters in the first 2 weeks of the month. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I find that it's best to look at a job posting and to tailor your resume and your cover letter for that specifically. So if you are participating in this challenge, definitely take a look at some job postings to get an idea of how to update your resume, or think about different experiences that you have that might not be on your resume now, but should make it there. And so, for example, I have, I think 3 different resumes. One is for education positions in tech. One is for developer positions, and then there's one that's for community. And so they're all similar, but they prioritize things in a different way in order to be most effective for different types of job postings. So I think it's useful to find job posts. If you have a job board that you really like, go ahead and put that in the chat, and that way we can point people in that direction too. We can get that conversation going on in the monthly challenge channel as well. I know that so I'm currently in DevRel, and there are some DevRel specific job boards that people have been sharing in the DevRel channel in Virtual Coffee. I think that LinkedIn is a place where other people find some jobs, but it would be great to hear where everybody else is looking. And let's see. Okay, so we've got just a little bit on resumes and cover letters here, but feel free to ask questions about that. We definitely have people at Virtual Coffee who are happy to give feedback on resumes and cover letters. So if that's something that you've worked on, if you want some feedback, ask in the monthly challenge channel. It's also great if you see a cover letter or a resume that you think is really stellar, put those in the channel as well. It's always good to have more resources for others to see. And I think that's one of my favorite things, just to look and see how other people are representing things on their cover letters or in their resumes, to help give me an idea of what is effective. And I think that Chris is here and has also given some links to Taylor Desson's resources. And I think that there are other people at Virtual Coffee who have used those too. And so one of the things that we want to tie together for this challenge is the resume, the cover letter, and the elevator pitch should all be working together to tell your story, but in a different way. So your resume gives that bulleted, sparse story, and then the cover letter builds on that and tells your story a little bit more. And then finally, that elevator pitch should really capture, who you are and how all of these things work together. And so that's kind of why in week 4, we are taking time to tie all of these things together. So we have the resume, we have the cover letter, and the elevator pitch. But if they're all telling very different stories, that can be really confusing. So finding ways to create that thread that loops everything together is only going to help make you more effective with what you're doing. And so, yes, at the end of the month, if you choose to, you don't have to do this. We will collect resumes and cover letters. We'll have a form, and if you want us to display them on the monthly challenge page, we can go ahead and put that there, and we'll tweet out that, hey, we've got some folks who have their resumes and cover letters, and this is what they've been working on. If you choose to submit an elevator pitch, then you can record yourself, and we'll put that up on our YouTube channel and hopefully have a playlist of all of those things. Let me see. Taylor Dessin's live resume review is happening later today. Chris, do you know what time that's happening?
He rescheduled. It's been delayed. It'll be February 23rd. Same time.
Cool.
I posted a new link in the on Slack.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll get that updated here. So that's not happening today, but no worries. That will be happening this month. And I think the pizza guy is now knocking at my door. Even though I said, just leave it on the bench. Sorry. I sent my kids a message on Discord and hopefully they'll answer the door. If not, there's going to be no pizza for me. Refocus. All right. So what else do we have going on? We have a lot of job application materials and resources there. So a couple of different things. These resources, I think, are pretty great. But if you have another great resource that you would like to see us put on the monthly challenge page, let us know. You can either suggest it in the monthly challenge channel, or you can just create a PR that adds that resource to this page. Either way, we'll get it up there and make sure that everybody has the resources that they need to be successful in this challenge. Okay, so what if you need help? We're always here to help, of course, and you can do that. You can ask in the help and pairing channel, you can ask in the monthly challenge channel, or in the job hunt channel. You'll notice that a lot of people are posting different jobs in the job hunt channel. If you want specific help for the challenge, probably the best place to do that is to do it in the monthly challenge channel. So I'm just going to go over a couple of little things here. Let's see here. So we're trying to get job ready this month. And so here are the different pieces again that we're working through. So the idea of the resume is to highlight that experience and also to make sure that you have make sure that you are able to talk about the things that you've done, the experience that you've had in a meaningful way. Okay, you can get it. Sorry about that. So highlight your experience in a meaningful way, do it in a way that is skimmable and highlights the main points of what you're doing. I think that also with resumes, you want to make sure that they are readable as well. You know, sometimes people have things that are in tiny font or there's no margins. You want to maintain that spacing. And I've talked to a couple of folks who are recruiters or who review resumes. And one of the things that they commented on when you are submitting your resume is to try to differentiate yourself from others who are in that pile. And how do you do that? Well, I like the example, if there were a pile of resumes and they got dropped on the floor, how would the person who picks up that pile know your resume from anybody else's in that pile? So if you have the same experience, if you've built similar projects to other people in tech and you're trying to land a job in tech, what have you done that distinguishes your work from other people's work? And so, maybe you don't have that. When I taught college English, I had a student who was working on a resume. And he said, I don't really know what I can put on the resume or what differentiates me from anybody else who is in this program at a university. And so then we kind of went through and looked at his experience, looked at his hobbies. And one of the things that he talked about was he taught himself how to weld swords, create swords from metal. Okay. That wasn't the job that he wanted. He didn't want to be a sword maker, but that differentiated him from everybody else in that pile. And it showed that he had the ability to teach himself, to learn a new skill. And this isn't an easy skill to learn, right? He's doing metalworking. He's fashioning a sword into a specific shape. So that's sometimes thinking outside of the box. He's not going to put that in job experience, but you can have a section for hobbies and think about how that relates to what you're doing. Right now, the top of at least 2 of my resumes explains my experience at Virtual Coffee. All of the things that we've done at Virtual Coffee, it's not my job, right? This is something that I do for fun, but it's a lot of the experience that I want to be able to highlight for things. So maybe you're a volunteer here and you can include that information. Maybe you're going to give a lightning talk at the end of the month. That can go on your resume. Think about how you can differentiate yourself. Think about the groups that you're a part of and how that information might be helpful to go on your resume. Other things like open source experience, other group work and volunteer work can be really invaluable in setting yourself apart from other people. And then when we move on to the cover letter, you really want to tell the story of that experience. So the resume, it's a skimmable thing. Like you might have some numbers in there, increased efficiency by 15% by doing this thing, right? A resume might have that. The cover letter is going to tell the story of that. So I know that a lot of people hate writing cover letters, but I think it's a really great way to differentiate yourself from other people and to create a personal connection. It's an invitation to participate in your story. So you don't want to write a long story, obviously, for a cover letter. But if you highlight something that's personal and about you, then you're more likely to be remembered by the person who is reading that cover letter. So think about, okay, what did I highlight in my resume? What is a story that demonstrates those skills? Or what is the story that I can tell that makes me, that highlights the traits that I want to for this position? So, maybe you want to demonstrate grit. How do you demonstrate grit? Tell a story of something that you've done that showcases that you worked through a really difficult and challenging time. So what you might want to do if you're writing a cover letter is examine the company a little bit more, find out the type of person that they're looking to hire, see who the team is, and identify the story that you want to tell, the one that you want them to remember. And then lastly, that elevator pitch is where you captivate your audience. That is the real personal connection that you have and an opportunity to be able to do that. And I think we talked about this at Virtual Coffee last week, maybe. But when do you give an elevator pitch? Well, there's lots of opportunities to do that. And I was saying, my brother and I used to write screenplays together, and I can't remember if it was in one of the resources or one of the podcasts that we frequently listen to, but they said, always be ready to pitch your screenplay. Like if you're in line at Starbucks, be ready to pitch your screenplay to the person behind you. And at the very least, I think the elevator pitch is kind of the same thing. You don't realize who you're talking to. I recently was in the airport. I had a long layover and I was sitting across from a gentleman at in the airport lounge, and he was asking me about what I did, and he said, well, yeah, I do stuff with computers and not a lot of people really understand. And I said, well, I'm in tech, so I might understand, right? And so the person sitting across from me is somebody who is in security at a pretty large company, and we were able to talk through technology and form this connection that we wouldn't have otherwise. But the point is, be able to tell somebody what you do, who you are, and why they should be interested in having a conversation with you at any point, because you don't know when that connection is going to lead to something else. So, finding that way to tell your story and to tell the story that you want them to take away is really important. And so I have a couple of tips for that. Let me look at this chat here. Oh, Ryan says, I know a guy who got a job because he liked playing Magic the Gathering. The whole dev team played it. Exactly. That's a great way to make a connection. You can also open mail with the sword. Super useful. That would be some really intense mail, I think. But making that personal connection is really important. And so I'm going to get all English teacher on you here and talk about the rhetorical triangle, because I think it's important. So in rhetoric, there's a thing called the rhetorical triangle, and this has there's a balance of ethos, pathos, and logos. And all of these things work together to make a convincing argument. And if we think about what we're doing with resumes, cover letters, and elevator pitches, we are making an argument for ourselves, right? We want somebody to hire us. And ethos demonstrates your credibility. Why are you credible for this role? What experience do you have that makes sense for me to hire you? And I was reviewing CFPs for a conference a couple of years ago. And one of the questions that they had for reviewing to determine whether or not to accept was, why is this the person who should be telling this story or giving this talk? And that's kind of what you're looking for here. So if you want to think about yourself in terms of applying for a job, think about, okay, why should I be the person to get this job? How are you going to demonstrate that credibility? Well, maybe you've been working on JavaScript in the last year and you've contributed to these open source projects, or you've created this whole website from scratch, or you've created a site for a client or something like that. But figure out how you can build that credibility into your story. Pathos is one that we often rely on. That's emotion, right? You make an emotional connection with someone. It might be like, hey, I really love Magic the Gathering. Me too, right? Like there's a connection that's created there in an emotional connection. And so finding what that is can be really important. And we often, I think, rely on that. And it can be good to have that emotional connection with other people because they often remember it as something that is personal and important. But you want to come out of an interview with it. If you rely on pathos, you might have an interviewer who says, I would really love to work with that person because they seem really cool to work with, right? Like that's often stuck on that appeal to pathos. But what you want coming out of that interview is the interviewer to say, I really think that person is cool and I would like to work with them because they bring so much knowledge to the job, right? You want to be cool and you want to be knowledgeable. Like that's what gets you out of an interview and gets you an offer. And so finding that way to appeal to pathos is important, but it shouldn't be relied on. And then lastly, there's logos. So that goes right along with pathos in demonstrating that idea of credibility. What have you done that would make them want to hire you? So if you improved efficiency in the process of your team or whatever you were doing, that goes towards that logical side of the argument. So provide some evidence, provide some research. Numbers go a long way in logos if that's something that you have and you can do. So the point of all of this, why am I telling you about all these Englishy things, is because when you're creating your elevator pitch specifically, you should be thinking in terms of, how do I balance these three things? And an elevator pitch, the term elevator pitch, which I guess I probably should have started with, comes from the idea of, if you get onto an elevator, if you're riding an elevator with someone and you are telling them about yourself, you're pitching them your idea or yourself for a job or whatever, you only have the amount of time that it takes to ride that elevator with them. So we're not talking about a 5-minute pitch. We're talking about something pretty quick. So you're probably looking between 1 and 2 minutes, maybe even less. So you can also think of, there might be different versions of this elevator pitch. Maybe you're riding from the ground floor to the top floor of a very tall building. How would you present yourself in that way? Maybe you're riding from floor 1 to floor 2. What is that version of your elevator pitch? How can you demonstrate that you're credible, make a connection, and also bring logic into that elevator pitch? If you can do that in a balanced way, then you're going to be way more effective. Let me see. Are there any questions or thoughts so far? I'm going to stop sharing. No questions. All right, I'm gonna just open this up for conversation right now. If anybody wants to jump in and talk about their experiences with writing resumes, cover letters, or creating an elevator pitch. I know for me, I'm looking forward to, I can put the slides in the monthly challenge channel. I'm looking forward to creating an elevator pitch because I don't think I particularly have a good one. I'm a technical community builder, and I find that I don't do a great job of explaining what that is to people who are outside of tech. And I think that really limits my abilities. I should be a good communicator. So if I can't tell you in 30 seconds what I do, if I can't talk about it to a non-technical audience, then that's definitely a weakness. And so that's something that I want to work on. I don't have a collection of good examples of elevator pitches. Has anyone seen or heard somebody do a really good elevator pitch? I was just looking through some of the resources to see what we have. I think there's, what I would explore looking for good examples are often talks that people do or podcast episodes. I think that Taylor Dessen, the recruiter from Vaco, does a really good job of saying who he is and what he does, and he does it with confidence. You get a lot about Taylor in his short introductions to things. But most people at the beginning of a talk say who they are and what they do. And so if we find some good examples of those, I think that would be a way to look at elevator pitches in a non-traditional way. So this isn't something that somebody might say on an elevator, but what do we get from their explanation of who they are? And I would encourage everybody, so as you're working on your elevator pitch, maybe to write down ethos, pathos, and logos and say, how can I demonstrate each of these things in this pitch? And then how can we bring them together? And if throughout the month you find that like you have some ideas and you're brainstorming some things, you're not sure how to put them together, or you're not sure that it's good, we can do some workshopping of what that elevator pitch is. So maybe we all can jump in the co-working room one day and practice our elevator pitches or get feedback. I know for me personally, I like to write everything out fully before I practice giving that talk. So does anybody want to try and give an elevator pitch right now? No, we've got nobody. That's fine. You don't have to.
I could try. I don't usually do elevator pitches, but Okay, so I have to pitch myself in like 15 seconds. That's the deal. Okay.
Yeah, I'll give you
So
30 if you want it.
okay. All right. So if you're looking for an experienced developer focusing on web-based technologies, who works really well with a team, you're looking right at him. I don't know.
I like it. I like it. It gets the idea of what you're looking for specifically, and talks about, hey, I've got this ability. And so talking about your experience and your background, I think would go a long way to say like, hey, look, I've also done this at these different places, and this is how I've demonstrated that I'm a good teammate as well. I mean, Nick, you volunteer at Virtual Coffee and Collab Lab and other places and Stream. And so all of those things are really great benefits to what you bring to the team. And it's a public resume, right? Like people see you and they see how you interact with other people. Andrea, your hand was up. Do you have a question or do you want to go?
I can try to go. Mine is kind of long. So I only have the one version, but hi, I'm Martz. I'm a software developer with a master's degree in educational measurement and statistics. In my previous career, I managed projects and programs in the professional certification testing industry, and that's how I learned to adapt to new situations and learn new skills quickly. And I had a knack for finding process inefficiencies and coming up with improvements that would lead to an increase in both profits and client satisfaction. So that was a win-win. But there were some inefficiencies that I just couldn't fix without knowing how to build software. And that bothered me because I knew I didn't know how to do it, but I knew that I could do it if I just, learned. So I decided to make a career pivot. See, I'm deviating a little, and take my analytical skills in a new direction and become a software engineer. And so since then, I've learned about full stack engineering. I've participated in collaborative experiences like the Collab Lab, continued learning on my own, worked as a software engineer at an early stage startup, just to name a few things. I also got my certification, AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner. And so I'm looking for my next role and hoping to bring my skills, curiosity, and warmth to a diverse team that supports each other and shares knowledge, and where I can learn best practices.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good job, Andrea.
Okay, don't just say that though. Is there any feedback?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going there next. I think you do a really, really great job of the ethos and the logos portion of what you're talking about. You talk with credibility. You list a lot of things that have made you credible. I think one thing that you can improve on is making it a little bit more personal, right? Like, tell me a story about something. You have a lot of like really unique and interesting experience. And I like that you talk about the career pivot there. You mention it, but maybe it's diving a little bit deeper into what that experience has been like, or what your, a little bit more about who you are, because that personal thing is what's going to help create that connection, right? Like you want to be the cool person and the smart person, right? And I think that you've captured the smart person here, and I know that you're cool. So finding that way to tell that story a little bit more of who you are is going to deepen the connection that you make.
So that's great. Maybe this is a question that we could continue the conversation later, but it's already so long. Like something has to be taken out to put whatever that would look like in. So I don't know what to take out.
Yeah. Okay. So I think also another thing that can be useful when you're working on elevator pitch is record yourself and listen back to what you've said. And so I think that the portions where you start to feel like you're listing things, those are the find a way to not list all of those things. How can you cut those things down and tell the story of who you are rather than I've done all of these things. So condense that. You don't have to give them the entire resume, right? Like give them the most important pieces. I don't know that we need to know all of the experience that you've had, including working at an early stage startup and kind of like that ending. I get why you have that information in there. But unless you're applying at an early stage startup, that might not be the most important part of the conversation. And also, if anybody else here listened to Andrea's elevator pitch and has feedback, please feel free to share that as well, because I think that, you know, having these conversations and being able to walk through them together also will help us to improve our elevator pitches.
And you might save me from having to listen to my own voice, as Becca is suggesting. I don't want to record it.
I think the one thing I say, and I'm definitely no elevator pitch expert, but it took a bit for you to put it together. And I mean, once you've practiced it, I think when you give an elevator pitch, it just has to be like bing bang boom, you know, like no like and kind of, but like obviously we were put on the spot here and we haven't created elevator pitches before. But if like I think if you just prep, you know, before you go to these things, always be ready for somebody to ask for your elevator pitch. Yeah. I guess that's the I hope that's constructive.
Well, if you think about it, in any situation, if you go to a conference or a meetup, or you're meeting someone for the first time, that's the initial conversation. Everybody wants to know, like, who are you, right? Tell me about yourself. And that's essentially what an elevator pitch is, except with a little bit more emphasis on you're trying to convince somebody to hire you or buy your product, or, you know, there's that element of wanting to convince somebody. Nina commented in the chat, you could take out things that demonstrate the same skills. That's a good idea. So simplify it. You know, you don't have to tell all of the things, remember, because this is just kind of that highlight reel, or the montage of all of the things that you've done to get to this point. And so you want to find those exciting parts and leave out the journey that's in between.
Yeah, but so different people have different formulas for this. And for career changers, some people recommend that you tie the past to the present. This is where you're coming from. Like, why did you choose software engineering? And maybe I'm just not good at doing that concisely, but I feel like that involves a little bit of a story of the journey, which is what you're saying to make shorter. So there are different formulas out there. And I don't know if I'm doing any of them perfectly, but I don't know.
That's not what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
I think that you're right. You have to tie the past to the present as a career changer, because you have so many skills that you bring from your past experience, right? You have a lot of like notable, incredible things. It's what I'm trying to say is, like, in terms of the journey, is you don't have to tell all of the parts of the journey, right? So pick the most important parts, and you can leave out the ones that seem less important. So like Nina is saying too, if you're giving an example and it demonstrates the same thing as your second example, pick which example is most powerful or most meaningful. And Andrea, I just want to emphasize that I think that your elevator pitch is very good. You capture a lot of the ethos and the logos of that. I think that you're very close to really nailing it. So I do appreciate you sharing and accepting feedback. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thanks. Yeah. I don't know, maybe I could give some alternative perspective, because I went through something similar when I was job hunting a few months ago. Not so much with an elevator pitch, but that like quick synopsis of who I am and why you're talking to me kind of thing. And tried to keep it to 1 minute. I found I was like literally giving a whole biography about me, and I'm just rambling. So I mean, maybe a good analogy to look at it is like, take what you have and try and put it in a format of like a movie trailer. So you want to give a little bit of information, but just not the whole movie, enough to kind of like what their appetite to ask questions. Ooh, you mentioned this, that sounded interesting. Let me like kind of ask more about that like later. So you kind of draw in the person and catch their attention with certain bits that sound interesting, but don't like stop there and don't go into the explanation as to why you did it. More, this is what I've done, maybe. That's kind of how I approach a similar problem when doing the whole interviewing process.
I really love that advice. The idea of how can you get them to ask you more questions and approaching it from that perspective, I think provides a unique way to approach writing your elevator pitch. How can you want them to ask you questions, right? Because that's where the engagement comes from. And then that's ultimately where you'll be able to develop some of those things that you talked about, the things that make you credible, the skills that you've demonstrated, and more about who you are as a person. So that's a really great way to evaluate an elevator pitch, I think. Make them feel like they want to ask more questions. Yeah, exactly, Nina. Okay, and Nina also has some thing in the chat. Finding difficult writing resume, cover letters, elevator pitch is condensing life experience into one page and a few paragraphs. Yes, that's really hard, especially if you haven't had a straightforward journey into whatever career you're in right now. And one of the things that I talked to a recruiter about recently was the idea of the single page resume. And I know when I was in school, it was always do not go more than a single page. But it seems like people are more open to multiple page don't give a 7-page resume. Don't do that. Like, that's not good. But 2 pages can be reasonable if you have relevant experience. And this is also why I have multiple resumes based on different things. My background is in teaching college English. In many cases, that is not relevant to nobody cares if I'm applying for a front-end developer job that I spent 10 years teaching college English. Doesn't make a difference. If I'm applying for a job that's in DevRel, education, community building, then it's a little bit different, right? Because that experience as a teacher is something that aids me in the current job search. So if you think about a job that you're looking at, finding it's exactly like what we're talking about with Andrea's elevator pitch too. Looking at what is most important to highlight here. Do I need to give all of this information, or can I take it off of the resume? So find what is most relevant to the job that you're applying for and start there. Give yourself a little leeway if you have a 2-page resume. So if it makes sense for you to have all of that information on there, then put it on there, unless they say we only want a 1-page resume. And then sometimes I'll be creative with how I organize the resume. It's not going to be a chronological job resume. I'll say relevant experience. I'll put that at the top, list some of the things that I've done there, and then include other experience towards the bottom. Or what else do I have on there? I do a lot of speaking on podcasts and conferences. And so I have a section that's on there for that as well. Yeah, and so yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say or ask, in my career journey, the pivots that I've taken have been like very sharp turns. So I'm curious if it would look bad if I was to just like remove like a whole, 4 years, and it would look like I haven't worked for 4 years. Is that an issue, or should I just not overthinking and just keep the ones that are relevant? So for example, I was doing mechanical engineering when I first got out of college, and even within mechanical engineering, I was doing a rotational program. So like the different roles were different. And then after that, I was running like my own company. I did that for a while. And now I'm doing software engineering. So it's like the company that I was running it was a fitness and wellness coaching. So it's like completely like different. So I'm sure I can find ways to tie that into software engineering, but I was curious, like if if there are experiences that are just completely kind of irrelevant, or I feel are irrelevant, and they take up like 1-2 years, is that an issue or not really?
I would still include it in the resume just to show that you have been working on different things. And even though you've done a lot of very different things, I think that all of those things help paint the picture of who you are and are actually really interesting. Like, I would like to know more about that and why you made that decision. But I don't think that you need to capture it on your resume in a way that tells that full story. It could just be listed there, right? Additional experience. And then you list those things to show that you have done them. It leaves room for a conversation and also showcases that you don't have a 4-year gap in employment history.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. I love how you said relevant experience and then other experience. I think that helps a lot to just bring what's relevant to the top. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, just to reiterate what you said, Becca, the gap in employment history is important because not if you have a gap, like I remember, it was a bigger company I applied to, and when I had to fill out something, I had to literally say what I was doing every year. So like, even though it's not necessarily, tech stuff, basically what Becca said, but it's just, it was the only time I ever saw it where they wanted to trace everything I did. But so I think having it in the additional is a good way to do that. So.
Just check in the chat as well. Okay, what are some kinds of specific questions? And if anybody else has feedback, feel free to share that too.
Sorry, I'm a little awkward. I was finding
No, you're fine.
the mute button. I was also gonna maybe offer a different, maybe slightly different response to that question. I don't know how to turn my camera on. Because I have I think we might have similar backgrounds actually. I did biomedical engineering first, and then I was doing a PhD and some other work before I moved to tech. It might also depend on like where that it might depend on like when that other experience happened in your resume as well, or like in your career. Because I know like for me, my resume was starting to resemble a CV after I've had some jobs in tech, so I just straight up removed them. Like they're on my LinkedIn, and I will like kind of like mention it in an elevator pitch if it does come up. But I like to focus my resume and stuff for like the career that I have right now. But if it was like something like, if I were like in tech, if it took a break to do something else and came back, then maybe I would try to find a way to keep it on there. But sometimes resumes can get a bit unwieldy if you leave everything on there. But I mean, that's just like my opinion, but I could be wrong.
No, I don't think you're wrong, Alexis. And I think that there are different ways of doing things and finding what makes sense for you. I think it's really great advice too. And so I'm glad that you shared that as well, because it can be exactly like you said, it can get unwieldy, and finding how to present yourself in the best way can take a lot of different forms. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I just wanted to also add, like, you're not alone. Like, I've done so many things, and I'm probably the worst example for like steady, consistent work. Came from an engineering background, but I've like done tree planting, I've done like window washing, construction, and I've worked as a field engineer. So I've kind of done it all. And I had a similar issue when transitioning into tech as well, with how do I make my resume like stand out? So, I mean, for the first like chunk, or the last like 4 jobs or whatever, enough to get like a full page, I kind of took that approach and I left the rest out. But I really highlighted the technical aspect and the fact that I had an engineering degree. And I think like with everyone who's transitioning, the hardest part is getting that first job. And like having the resume is one part, but I think it's more so what you're doing now. And people aren't really going to worry too much about what you did in the past, more so what do you have to show now with regards to what you want. So I don't know. I hope that's kind of helpful in some regards. Doesn't really answer the question though, I think, but yeah.
Yeah, I think there's lots of different approaches here. So all of this is valuable and great to have as part of the conversation. I want to make sure that we get to this question in the chat because I think it's an important one. What are some kinds of specific questions one can use to find things to put into the pitch for people who have low self-worth and or imposter syndrome? And I think that's a really good question. And it can be really hard, especially if you're experiencing those things, to put together that elevator pitch. And so for me, sometimes what can be helpful is to ask somebody who knows you what they would put in there. If there's somebody that is a trusted friend, maybe it's somebody in the co-working room, right? To have that conversation, to be able to share that information. The other thing, if you can try and step out of yourself for a second, what are things that are interesting about your journey or your experience? How do you demonstrate credibility? You know, if you completed a boot camp, if you completed a certification, if you have some type of educational experience, that can be a really great place to start. Have you completed a project? Have you contributed to open source? Have you participated in a group learning experience? So maybe start with some of the things that are easier to talk about. Like it's objective to say, I created this website, or I have written this blog. You've done a thing, and you can start with that list, the list of things that you've done. And then think about what might be interesting to other people about you that connects to what you're talking about. Go ahead, Aaron.
Thanks. So speaking from a previous job where I was the team lead of a help desk, my manager, when I first started, I didn't have experience, but I learned a couple certifications. And I think he saw that I took that initiative on my own to, take that where I'm willing to learn, even though I didn't have actual knowledge. And then when I became team lead and we were hiring more people, he said, hey, we've got this guy, he's very green, really doesn't know much. And basically I laid out, because it sounded like me, and I just asked, is he willing to learn? And I think as you're making a transition into a tech or any new job, if your current or previous knowledge set doesn't really match, but you're showing that you're putting the time and effort in projects or certificates, anything like that, you're showing that you're putting that effort, then I think that goes a long way. It could vary from manager to manager, but that's just my personal experience.
Thanks, Aaron. There's a lot of great things that you said there. And I love the idea of it will vary from manager to manager. And that's so true. And so what works for one person might not work for you. It might work with one manager and it might not work for another one. And so I think it's important to think about, how we're sharing our stories, our resumes, our cover letters, whatever. There's definitely going to be, there's not one right way to do it. You're not going to turn in a resume that every single person looks at and says, this is amazing, right? And so it's not about getting it right or getting it wrong. It's about best representing yourself to the audience that you are looking to engage and target. So every audience is going to be different. And this is why I find that it helps me to research the people in the company and the company itself to get some idea of how to tailor it to that specific thing. I know that's very time consuming. And if you're applying to a lot of jobs, that's not a sustainable thing. But consider the jobs that you are most interested in and how you can be most effective in what you're turning into them. I like what Jörn put in the chat, the idea of the brag doc. And I think actually Nick Taylor is the one who first mentioned it to me a couple of years ago now. And it's the idea of when you have done something, it could be you've done something that you're proud of, somebody has commented to you in a positive way, put that in the document to help you keep track of that, right? If somebody congratulates you on doing a good job. Add that to your brag doc. Who else? I know that there are some people here who are maintaining a brag doc. What else do you put in there?
I just started doing one this year, but mine, I probably tweak it a little bit from what you're saying. It's keeping me motivated. Not, I hate that word. Like, I am motivated for sure, with or without a brag document, but like, it helps me to look back and go, oh yeah, January was really productive. And for me, because it's not like a way to document for my manager at the end of the year, because I don't have one of those right now, unfortunately. But like, I have a lot of things I need to do, goals, things I want to learn, jobs to apply to, things to keep track of. And it feels very overwhelming. And, oh, I forgot this thing, but I remembered and did well the other 75. And sometimes they're just little things that are easy to forget. So like, I'm putting personal things in there because in January, after the holidays, I drove my son down to Nebraska and back in one day. There's no way I could have achieved anything else that day. So that goes in there. I did that. So when I look back, no, I wasn't applying to jobs or learning anything new that day, but that's why. Yeah, there was a really good reason. So it just helps me look back and go, okay, I am really achieving things, but sometimes they're just too small to like remember as an accomplishment, or they don't fall in the category of tech like that one. So that's what I've been doing, and it really helps me.
I love that, Andrea. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just gonna say, yeah, just echo that. It doesn't have to be tech for sure. I mean, like, Becca likes lifting heavy things, so do I. Like, it could be, hey, I got my 1 PR max for something, because these are still accomplishments. Like, I think people tend to forget how amazing they can be, and so that's why the brag doc is good, because like, and it doesn't matter what level you are in your career. Like, I've been in the industry longer, but I get down on myself too, and I look at that, or I doubt myself too, so these things are, I think they're important throughout your whole career. And just in life too, if you're feeling kind of down in the dumps, I think it's something super helpful.
Yeah, I think that's great. In the chat, we have in my brag doc, what I did at work, what I've learned, what I've done in the community, posts I've written, podcasts, how I volunteer, open source contributions. And there's also a link in the chat from Yearn. We'll try and get that posted in other places so people can access that after today's event. So yeah, I think brag doc is a really great, I'm really bad about maintaining it. One thing that I am doing this year, which is different, but I have a Trello board set up for all the content that I'm producing. And so if I write a blog post, it goes in the Trello board. If I create a YouTube video, it goes in the Trello board. And this is because in the last year, I found at the end of last year, I felt like I hadn't accomplished very much at all. And, everybody is doing their end of the year blog posts and with all the stats of the stuff that they did. And I felt like, I know I did stuff, but I don't know what I even did last year. And so to make sure that I don't end up in that situation, and to kind of help me, like Andrea was saying, have some motivation, I can literally see that I have done these things. I can see how many of these things that I've done. And it helps me to recognize that, like, okay, I have grown in the last year. Whether last year was a good year or a bad year, I can at least identify that I've accomplished these things and I've gotten better at them because I have that proof in front of me. So even finding ways to track the work that you've done, it might be, hey, I spent 2 hours learning to code this week, or I worked with a new technology, or I listened to these podcasts that talked about whatever. Having that can also help you to figure out what you want to write down what's interesting about you, what your career journey looks like. Oh yeah, Andrea, I love that too. Helps compile stories for job interviews. And incremental growth is still growth.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm
totally.
just trying to catch up.
Yeah, like I think people might not realize how much they do in a year, because you're not taking note of it, but it adds up, and it's like anything, little things, they add up, it's like whether you're thinking like atomic habits or something, doing that thing every day, slowly breaking up a problem and then working on it bit by bit. All these things, they compound into something bigger. So like, I don't know. I just encourage people to try it. And I might be saying the obvious, but don't confuse the brag doc with like being cocky. That's not what it is. It's really, it's something, stuff you're proud of, and stuff that it's great for a rainy day when you're just not feeling great. Or like Andrea said, which is really great too, you go to a job interview and you can all of a sudden, you can just go take a look at your brag board. Oh, well, I've done these few things in the past year, and like I was pretty pumped about those, and I guess it ties into interview prep too, which is not necessarily what we're talking about today, but having some stuff ready for like some potentially usual questions that will come up, like the classic, like what's your strength and what's your weakness kind of thing,
Can I just add, my husband I don't think he calls it a brag document, but a previous manager he had encouraged him, or made him, and at first he didn't like it, but then he grew to love it, made him kind of like document every week what he accomplished and then send it to her at the end of the week. And so he's long since, not worked for her, but he kept doing it with bosses who didn't even ask for it. And so in his current job, his boss just absolutely loves him because he's so easy to manage. He knows exactly what's going on without any effort. And he, the last 2 years, got one of the highest percentage raises, if not the highest, like in the company. It's not a huge company, fewer than 100 people, I think. But, it's because he was able to document. And if you wait, even like 2 months, you don't remember all the stuff you did. You can't really tell the story of how that built up to something bigger, so that has really just had very practical importance for him.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I know we're at time, Becca, sorry, but yeah, what you're saying, Andrew, is true. Like, people aren't going to know what you're doing unless you tell them, and that can actually affect performance reviews, like you just said. So I don't mean you need to be walking, well, not that everybody's in an office, but you don't have to be running down the virtual cooler screaming, hey, I did this, I did this, I did this. But definitely letting your manager know at least you've been doing all these things I think will definitely go a long way.
I think that's a great way to end. So I want to thank everybody for coming today, for listening, for sharing. And if you have more questions, go ahead and put them in the monthly challenge channel. And hopefully we will all see each other again soon.